Good afternoon, everybody. We're just waiting for people to join the meeting, so we will stop momentarily. All right, so let's get started, everybody. So good afternoon from Harare. We are, delighted to have everybody here. And you're all welcome to the Digital Transformational Agenda that is brought to you by Telco, Broadband and Beyond. I'll just start with a few housekeeping items. Just a gentle reminder to everyone, if you are not speaking, if you could kindly be on mute to reduce feedback. And in addition to Zoom, we will post this recording to Facebook, and we are keen to have as much engagement as possible. During the Q&A session, please feel free to send your questions as and when they arise throughout the presentation, and we shall get to as many of them as possible when we do our Q&A. We'll start with a few introduction remarks. We'll introduce the panel, discuss our 3 set questions, and then move on to our Q&A, followed by a vote of thanks and ending with some concluding remarks. During our program, we will have a brief presentation from Telco as well. And just a quick reminder of our 3 key questions. The first question is, what parts of the industry have been severely affected by disruptions in the value chain by COVID-19? Our second key question is, what challenges have arisen due to the lack of value chain coherence? And our third and final question is, where and what types of technologies can assist to bridge the gap? So given this disruption COVID-19 has had throughout the world, particularly in emerging markets, these are very pertinent questions for our finance and technology sector. All right. So let's kick off. My name is Tambandini Munutu. I am a co-founder of Munutu Dermatology, focused on skincare for women of color. We've launched a medical grade skincare product range, and we are also launching anti-acne and anti-aging skin kits this July. Before I embarked on entrepreneurship, I worked at Serengeti Capital in Accra, Ghana. Had a lovely time there, and that's where one of our panelists is from. And I led the joint venture investment fund with Gulf Capital, where we deployed 100 million in capital in sub-Saharan Africa. Prior to that, I worked at Merrill Lynch, then Bank of America Merrill Lynch in investment banking. And I have an MBA from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. So that's a little bit about me, so you know who's guiding you throughout this program. I'd like to hand off immediately to the Managing Director of Telco, Mr. Godfrey Joa, apologies, and he will give us some brief remarks about why we are here. So over to you, Godfrey.
Thank you, Tambu. Impressive CV right there. A warm welcome to our panelists, our viewers all over the world. It's good to have you on this 3rd installment of our Digital Transformation Agenda series. 3 days ago, we did one on health. And yesterday, we were on agriculture. And today, we're focusing on finance and logistics. As Telco, we are excited to be in the forefront of the digital transformation agenda in the developing world, and in Zimbabwe in particular. We're keen to partner with different ones to drive this agenda. We recognize that any business that's not embracing technology to serve customers and to create value is dead in the water in this environment. COVID or no COVID, this process is unstoppable. We're very excited to be a part of it. And so it's my pleasure to be able to welcome all of you today to this last installment of our three-part installment of webinars. We will be doing these in future more and more, but please sit back and enjoy and participate as much as you can. As Telco, we want to partner with you in doing this. Thank you very much, Tambo.
Thank you very much, Godfrey, for your comments. I think we can probably dive right on in with introducing our distinguished group of panelists. So I will start, of course, ladies first. Mercy Chachorchka Joa is an entrepreneur who has co-founded two businesses, namely Pickett Fresh Farm and West Oak Natural Foods. Her academic achievements include an MBA from Clark Atlanta University in the United States and a master's in food innovation from University of Modena and Reggio Emilia in Italy. She is a Mandela Washington Fellow, a CBZ Youth Empowerment Program Fellow, and a 3 Answers Australia Young African Business Empowerment Fellow. She is also a Women in Tech Zimbabwe co-chapter lead, board chairperson of the Sour Girls Speak Out Institute, the Quality Standards and Markets Expert Committee lead for the Federation of Young Farmers Club Zimbabwe, and is the only female executive at the Zimbabwe Volleyball Association. She is also an independent business development executive. So thank you for joining us, Mercy. Moses Mujati is an actuarial strategy and finance specialist who is focused on helping businesses to grow sustainably. His corporate career spans over 2 decades, during which he has consulted in several African countries in the areas of finance and technology. Our third panelist is Desmond Israel. He is the founder and lead consultant at Information Security Architects in Ghana, with over 1.5 decades of industry expertise in cyber and information security and data protection. He has led major enterprise projects for cybersecurity, maturity assessments, privacy program development, and impact assessments for Tier 1 banks and enterprise level organizations in Ghana, Liberia, and Nigeria. He is a practicing lawyer with Insea Akweta & Co. and provides regulatory compliance services for organizations including fintechs. He is the board secretary and volunteer for the Africa Digital Rights Hub. He is also a member of the International Association of Privacy Professionals, IAPP, and an immediate past co-chair of the IAPP KnowledgeNet Ghana chapter. Our fourth panelist is Gilbert Gumpo. He is the Chief Investment Officer and Head of Asset Management at Nyaradzo Group. He has enjoyed a long and distinguished career in the investment sector. He is the former head of property and unit trusts at Old Mutual and the former head of retail business also at Old Mutual. He is the chairman of the finance board at the Brethren in Christchurch and is the local chairman of Save Esgodini Hospital. He is a lifetime investor with interests in farming, property, among other things. Last but not least is Mr. Jeff Feary. He is the Director of Talent and Leadership Development and Corporate Learning for Africa at DHL Express and was previously the Managing Director at DHL International, a division of Deutsche Post DHL Group. His career spans over 26 years and he has held various positions in customer services, operations, quality, change management, program management in various countries. He is an economist, marketer, business model practitioner, project manager, customer experience and call center leader, and seasoned leader with years of experience at executive level spanning 3 continents. So I'm sure with such a rich and varied background, with entrepreneurs, with logistics professionals, with finance professionals, we will have, and legal expertise, we will have a fantastic conversation about matters pertinent to emerging markets. I'd like to now hand over to the 5 panelists, and I think we can go with Mercy to kick off our discussion. So the panelists will also give a few remarks about themselves and then dive into the question, what parts of the industry have been severely affected by disruptions in the value chain by COVID-19?
Thank you, Tambu. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Talco, for having me on this platform. My name is Mercy Chashkoka, as previously introduced. And I am in the business. I'm actually a food technologist by experience, and who's actually turned into farming now. So I am now an agripreneur. I am a co-founder of Picket Fresh Farms, and also a co-founder of West Oak Natural Foods. At Picket Fresh, we basically in the primary production of horticulture produce, mainly for local and export markets. And for West Oak, we're in the process of, in the business of agro-processing of fruits and vegetables. That's dried fruits, dried vegetables, and dried powders. So ginger powder, garlic powder, among other things. With regard, so you find that my concentration will be more on the agribusiness side of things. I should have been part of the panel yesterday, but for some reason, they thought that I should bring balance to today's conversation. So I'm glad to be here. But for me, the most disruptions of COVID-19 to businesses and the value chain were more on the agro-logistics side. So you find that agro-logistics was disrupted highly, especially for movement of goods in and around the different countries. So for most of the agricultural inputs, most of them you find that they're imported inputs, and they couldn't move as freely as intended during the first initial lockdowns, with a few exceptions where food exports were slightly relaxed during the lockdowns, where people discovered that we needed to have food supplies and that disruptions, and that was when there was the distinction to essential services. In as much as, yes, most production and agribusiness was essential services, it wasn't entirely clearly defined what is essential services, because you find that if we're looking at local farmers, they couldn't move their produce. A lot of farmers lost their produce in the farms because they were ready for market, but they couldn't move them. Most of them didn't have the exemption letters. And sometimes even with the exemption letters, the movement was just not as smooth as we expected. And with that, most cash flows were disrupted, and the buying power of consumers was also limited. And even in the shops where the essential goods, the food and everything was there, the buying power of the consumers wasn't there, because a lot of them depended on their businesses. And with agribusiness, for example, a lot of them were not prepared for these total lockdowns. So they didn't have their inputs on their farms in time for them to continue the supply chain. So the primary production was actually very much disrupted on that. And the production cycles were distorted as well, because for example, I remember there was a very depressing article that came around where a farmer in the United States was pouring out his milk so that he flushes out the system, because there is no way he could stop milking his cows. He had to continue with those same cycles, production cycles, but then with nowhere to deliver that milk to. So he had to flush it down the drain to the waste. And those are some of the critical things that as a business person, when you incur that, that's such a huge loss that was so much an impact. And you can imagine what it did to their balance sheet. And the financial risks of lending and borrowing was very high, because if when you have depressed cash flows in balance sheets that are not well presentable, you cannot go and borrow. Even the movement to go to the financial institutions was also very much restricted. So in that, I felt that COVID had a very huge impact on the primary production, and then all across the value chain as well, because if I am a primary producer of certain raw materials and I can't supply to any market, then it means the next level in the chain, the wholesaler and the retailer, don't have anything to supply eventually. So that's where we had the most hit. The agro logistics was just made too difficult for general consumers and primary producers along the chains. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mercy. I think that's very pertinent on how agribusiness is so dependent on having those cash flows from the sale of crops, and the lack of that cash flow compromises balance sheet integrity, meaning that it's difficult to service existing loans and it's difficult to access new financing. I think if we can move forward and speak to Mr. Moses Mujati about this topic of how the industry was severely affected by disruption in the value chain by COVID-19.
Great, thank you very much. Everyone can hear me? Good. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I consult in a very wide range of spaces. My bio says actuarial, finance, and strategy. So I find myself working with a lot of businesses across the continent. Just this morning, we had a seminar with one of the big insurers in Botswana, and it's very interesting to see the responses of each of the various nations and each of the various businesses to this COVID pandemic. Let me speak about South Africa, and I'll use South Africa as a baseline of that will inform some of my other observations. And these are observations, these are opinions. We're very welcome to disagree with them. Going into this COVID thing, I think we had two types of businesses. We had your very agile businesses who were able to overnight literally reinvent themselves. And I've had a privilege of working with such businesses. And we had a second class of business where they were not prepared at all. But nobody could have been prepared for COVID. It's one's agility and one's adjustment to a new normal, as it were, that will invariably determine whether my business remains as a going concern. So by way of summary, you had your agile businesses and you had your businesses which were not so agile. I think COVID came in, yes, COVID disrupted a lot of things, but I think what it served to do was COVID came in and helped with the process of, and this might sound a bit, it might not sound very nice, but COVID came in and it helped to cull some of those businesses that were already tottering, businesses that were indebted, heavily indebted. As you well know, South Africa is an environment that expands credit quite easily. So we saw a lot of businesses that had disruptions in their supply chain, or that had disruptions with their customers. As the previous speaker said, we saw a lot of those businesses being forced to downsize, right size, and eventually close. It's speculated that close to 3 million jobs were lost in 2020 in South Africa. But what we see as a result of COVID, with all the disruptions that happened, we see a very curious thing happening in the insurance space, where I spend most of my time. We saw an increased uptake of insurance products. We saw a decline in lapse ratios, and we saw a lot of people start to value their insurance a great deal. I call it the COVID fear factor. The prospect of death got people putting their houses in order by way of their insurance policies, by way of their funeral policies, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the things that we saw is we saw a lot of people becoming more aware of the things on offer to them, i.e. financial products. So you had a lot of people sitting at home and they suddenly had this time to start studying more, to start reading more, things that they would not normally want to read. We saw people start to get informed about the various types of financial products that are out there. And in South Africa, the reality is we saw the financial industry grow. We saw an increased uptake of financial products. Yes, we would have seen the people who are in primary production, like agriculture. We would have seen those things. We would have seen a downscaling of their operations. So my answer is really twofold. Financial space went that way, and like I said, that's where I spend most of my time. The second question is what challenges have arisen as a result? You know, I'm seeing businesses trying to.
I think. Sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Mujati. If we can just get the first round of with the panelists, and then we'll move on to question 2. So we'll kick off question 2 with you because you're quick off the mark. So let me hand it over to Desmond Israel to take us forward.
Thank you, Tambo. Okay, so I happen to consult a lot within the financial space, both for tier 1 banks and then for fintechs, startups. And I'm doing this both as a lawyer, where I'm looking at regulatory compliance, and I'm also doing it as a security and privacy practitioner, while you try to actually assess the digital transformation and ensure that as part of the framework of digital transformation, you are actually enhancing trust between the clients and their businesses, actually their businesses and their clients. So talking about disruption, I think what COVID did to most of the financial sector, especially Ghana, where I am more privy to the activities here, has to do with the cash flow coming in. We got to a point where the central bank had to bring in some measures, which was then termed as the COVID prudent expenditure, which is basically they were not getting enough inflows as they anticipated. So of course you can spend unduly. And so, one of the things that I personally think contributed to this is, and it goes back to Moses' point, there are a number of industry players or industry entities that were late for the call. You know, COVID was more like a wake-up call for many people who hadn't really prepared for the digital transformation. You see, the digital transformation agenda is not necessarily leveraging on technology. It's actually creating value and delivering the value. So it has to be conscientized. It is something that you have to develop as part of your process. And what happened to the financial sector is you could see a lot happening within the digital front. So more of connectivity, there was a lot of expenditure on connectivity so that you could still keep the customers in business. But you then have a challenge with how do I get my customers to be making payments? How do I get my customers to be withdrawing? So you could see that at the point, if you look at the statistics, the mobile money and mobile banking was very high. And you had very little to do with the conventional side of things, where the customer has to walk into the bank, because I mean, customers were even afraid of moving to the bank. I mean, who wants to leave his house when there's a pandemic, when the virus is walking out there? You know, so everybody stuck to connectivity in the house and tried to do digital banking. And that indeed had two folds. Yes, for those who are ready, they began to actually realize their higher investments in their digital platforms, because then they had their customers still connected to them and still doing business. And then you had those who are now scrabbling. They're trying to find their feet. They're trying to see how they can keep business going. And that disruption had to do with how customers are engaging the bank, the cash flow, and all. And like I said earlier on, there was also that connection about increase in connectivity. And that went across every business. Increase in connectivity just to make sure you can still be in touch, you can still get your customers having the same customer experience, which is another matter that I will touch on when we move to probably the next stage. So yes, the financial services was heavily disrupted, and it was more so because I could conveniently say most of us were not ready for COVID and the fact that yes, our customers were really going to be kept away from us and doing conventional business for a long while.
Thank you, Desmond. I'd like to move on to Mr. Gilbert Gumpo and get his thoughts, particularly given his asset management background. Sorry, Mr. Gumpo, you're on mute. You need to unmute.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to the panel and to our speakers and to our listeners everywhere. Like has been said, I come from the wholesale sector of money management. I think the topic about disruptions due to COVID-19, essentially this is saying the world moved into lockdown. Lockdown, as has been discussed, means a restricted people movement. They can't do what they normally did. I think it has been alluded to that in the financial sector, typically the farmers and everybody rely on the banking system to access their money. In the Zimbabwean economy, you will remember, we had all these queues around the banks, around the ATMs, people trying to access their money. But you know, when there is lockdown, that can't happen. You can't go there and queue at the bank. But life has to continue. You have to live, you have to eat. So these are some of the disruptions that we witnessed, that those who were used to go and see a particular bank teller, go to a particular bank, they couldn't do that anymore. So how did the people then cope? So we flipped this to the banking partners and banking institutions that had moved up significantly onto mobile money and other more platforms like that. So it's not just being able to transact electronically so that you can do what you have to do, but also it was promoting those products. I mean, if somebody wanted to apply for a mortgage, the traditional approach is you go and see a mortgage's clerk and so forth and discuss. But the disruption that we have seen is that you have to offer your mortgage solutions on the electronic platforms. If you didn't do that as a business, then you are not going to be very much around when the lockdowns is. So it covers all the product range. We also saw that the retail institutions, like some of your shops, they started moving things off electronically. So I think COVID lockdown just opened up our eyes to say that we can do a lot more in the economy whilst remaining where we are to a large extent, except perhaps for the farmers. So I would say this has been a necessary quickening up, like the first speaker said, of the process of automation and doing things off the physical environment. I'll stop there, pause there.
Thank you, Mr. Gumpo, much appreciated. I'd like to hand over to Mr. Jeff Fury to address, what parts of the industry have been severely affected by disruptions in the value chain by COVID-19, with particular attention to logistics, because that's vital to get goods from point A to point B.
Thank you, moderator, and greetings to the fellow panelists. It's great to be here. Dumi, if I can ask you to show our short video I just want to start with that short video. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And once again, good afternoon. I greet you all from Addis. So it was very simple. This question, I liked this first question. And that short clip was just showing you what actually happened. It was acceleration. So if there's one key word that I'll use is acceleration. And I liked what Moses talked about in terms of the two types of business. In my introduction, I wanted to actually say there are three types. The businesses that make things happen, the businesses that watch things happen, and the businesses that actually wonder what actually happened. This is what we see. So COVID-19 2020 actually accelerated that digital transformation by close to 2 to 3 years, yeah? So if I look at the logistics business, what we plan to do around 2025, we had to do it in 2020. This is how disruptive COVID was. And you will remember, I'm quite sure all the panelists will remember what happened around the supply fracturing of tissue paper, yeah? Tissue paper became a problem. We saw panic buying. We saw what was happening because the supply chain logistics had been disrupted, and this is what happens. And in our panelists here and in our participants, we've got ladies, and I can tell you one of the things that we observed during the thing was the shortage of lipsticks. Lipstick became a problem, yeah, just lipstick, and that we usually take it for granted, but during this, so we're kicked in the teeth that we needed to actually see and say, how do we become agile? How do we make sure that we move manufacturing closer to market and just rely on China? This is what we've seen. So I want to say what we've observed is that most of the logistics businesses, they've been on a peak period for the past 10 months. The peak period traditionally was the last quarter of the year from October to December, but due to COVID, the peak period is extended. It started around April all the way to now, yeah? So it's 10, 11 months that we're on peak periods. So e-commerce, that's why I was showing you that video. E-commerce actually, the surge was unprecedented, over 203%. This is what we've seen in different regions just because of COVID, because now we started having this new term work from home. So it was all about remote work and so forth. Yeah, and the goods that were being purchased in the past was actually around fashion and accessories. Yeah, so Brazilian hair, shoes, suits. Those were the things that were being purchased. But once we started going on lockdown, we saw a total shift. The goods that were now purchased were around setting up the offices, so at home. So it was now office accessories. So this is what we've seen. So this question was very simple for us. The disruption was across the board. It affected all sorts of industry. I remember listening to our panelists on Tuesday in the health services. They were heavily affected, and they were calling for us. So you can imagine, we lost in the air express space. We lost 73% of cargo space because most airlines got grounded. So in Africa, the only airline that was still flying was Ethiopian Airways. All the other airlines were grounded. So it meant that space was now at a premium. Globally, the cargo space was between 20 and 25 because we had some airlines that still needed to fly to protect their landing spaces. Because in bigger airports like in JFK, like in London Heathrow, if you do not utilize your landing slot, you lose it. Yeah. So this is what was happening. So disruption was all across, but COVID brought out the human side of things. I remember yesterday, on Tuesday, Cher was talking about medical tourism, what was happening in that space. And this is where the logistics partners were coming into that space. I remember we had to actually send what we call an onboard courier to go and deliver urgent cancer treatment in Zambia, where we were to put them on a charter plane to go and deliver that. This is what had happened, because ordinarily before COVID, they would just board a plane, South African Airways, and fly from Lusaka to Johannesburg, see their doctor. But this had to change. There were new times. They had to go to Rosebank Hospital, pick up these urgent medication in dry ice, and send them straight to the airport. Somebody was waiting for them. And they get onto this charter plane to Lusaka. Somebody is waiting for them. So all that was disrupted. We saw in manufacturing. I talked about lipstick. I talked about toilet paper. We saw in the hospitality. We saw in distribution. And we saw e-commerce that it shot. This was the best. This was the best. So this is one of the things that we see the agile companies. You know that Amazon actually increased its market capitalization last year by 600 billion because of the upsurge in e-commerce. This was just incredible. So this question has to look at the negative impact. There were lots of them, and we got kicked in our teeth. But there were also some positives. We've seen companies in the fintech, in logistics that have done fundamentally well because of this. Again, it's what Moses was talking about, that the companies were agile. So there was massive disruption, but that massive disruption has taught us lots of lessons. Thank you, Tambu.
Thank you very much, Jeff. That is very insightful, especially on the lipstick, because I would think with wearing all the masks, you wouldn't use your lipstick. But it's very interesting to see the switch in consumer behavior, and that lipstick was a leading indicator. I think we can, I'd like to thank the entire panel for those, insightful remarks across various sectors. And I'd just like to remind everybody that this webinar is being brought to us by Telco, Broadband and Beyond. I'd like to encourage everybody who's listening to keep submitting the questions via the chat, and we will get to that in Q&A. So let's dive straight into the second question. And I think I will lead with Mr. Mujati on what challenges have arisen due to lack of value chain coherence. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Let me answer the question in a roundabout way and say, what challenges has this whole COVID phenomenon brought about? I've listed a couple of things, and the first one that I have is that people who previously didn't have a voice woke up and they had a voice. Everybody was on their phone 24/7 because there was nowhere to go. So we had a lot of opinions. We had a lot of schools of thought that were previously not listened to start to come to the fore and demand their slice of attention. I'll give you an example. The disruption with, we had these Robin Hood fellows wanting to disrupt Wall Street. We woke up with a bunch of people investing in penny stocks to confound the conventional wisdom of Wall Street. So that was a problem that was a reason where people who didn't have a voice wake up and they suddenly have a voice. You know, we woke up with this whole switch over to technologically based platforms, all the Zooms, all the and this demand for us to imbibe, to drink all this technology overnight, because that's what is happening. We had a lot of security breaches. So you'll have seen in South Africa, last year we had a major security breach from a company called Experian. We woke up and all our financial data was everywhere, all over the web. So that accelerated uptake of technology caught us unprepared. You know, another challenge, which I think is which I find quite funny, is that we woke up and an African was the richest man in the world. You know, our friend Elon Musk, and COVID served to make it's a challenge, but it's an opportunity. COVID made the world, not necessarily COVID, but the rapid assimilation, the rapid consumption of technology suddenly made the world a very, very small place. It caused a lot of problems for governments. You know, my own government of the land of my native birth has for some time been trying to stifle people's opinions on social media, et cetera, But we woke up and these were some of the problems that we suddenly had, that people who didn't have a voice suddenly have a voice. You know, a constituency that was previously disenfranchised wake up and they can change the models. We suddenly have the proliferation of digital currencies. We suddenly have payment platforms like PayPal. We suddenly have Bitcoin becoming a legitimate investment class and start to threaten or start to challenge traditional investment classes like gold as a store of value. All these things, I think the greatest challenge that we found ourselves with was this rapid uptake of technology that we were not prepared for. Us digital migrants, I mean, you know, you guys know in telco, you've got your digital migrants and you've got your digital natives. I've suddenly got my 12-year-old son asking for my credit card so that he could buy a VPN solution. And I'm asking him, what do you need a VPN for at 12 years old? You know, and he's explaining that he needs to do this and do this and do this. So those are some of the challenges, our inability to assimilate, to understand, and to develop and to flow with this wave. We were caught unprepared, basically. That's it.
Thank you. And would Desmond like to continue on to share with sort of what challenges he's observed due to lack of value chain coherence?
Sure. I think the biggest thing that happened, you know, with the COVID disruption was that it put most of the corporate business strategies to the test, especially those that you are ordinarily anticipating that they would have been aligned to digital transformation. What happened? We saw a huge challenge on customer experience because now customers are confined in their homes. They want to still access service. They still want to have that interaction with their service provider, whether it's a bank, whether it's an insurance company. They still want to have that connection with them. And you could clearly tell that most of the issues that were coming out from support desk to all the way to the boardroom and all the emergency meetings that we're having had to do with customer experience. People are just panicking. Are we losing the customers? How are we going to keep them going? So customer experience was challenged, and this is because the mother document itself was flawed, and which is the digital transformation agenda, which has to fit into the bigger strategy of the corporate organizations. A lot of people did stopgap measures. I remember a few banks started to integrate to chatbots. They had subscribed to WhatsApp APIs. They've started developing chatbots so that their front desks and customer agents could quickly begin to, moderate some of these chatbots and get conversations going and get clients' issues resolved. Operational agility also became a problem. So now you have to work digital. How much investment have you made into the digital platforms? How much connectivity have you been able to put up? What is the redundancy if one service or the other is going to go down? People's business continuity was put to the test. Disaster recovery was put to the test. It was chaos everywhere for anybody working within my space. Moses mentioned the issue of data breaches. Well, it was not only data, there were actual breaches on ATMs and online banking platforms. But of course, where notification is not being enforced, most of these institutions are not going to say whether they've been breached or not. But if you were within the space and you were working, you could see that clearly this was happening. Then came in the culture and the leadership challenge. So we're all used to working conventional. COVID is here. We need to move digital. We need to get people connected. We need to get people still doing business with us. And the workforce is not ready because we haven't prepared them for that. We ourselves are not ready. So that was a huge challenge between the culture and the leadership and then the workforce enablement. And that is what COVID brought to us. The huge challenge we had to do with whether we were really accepting that the digital transformation is an integral part of our business, and that is what is going to help us deliver value. Unfortunately, I can say 9 out of 10 were not ready. They were not.
Thank you, Desmond. That's a very, very great assessment of, sort of the digital naivete of some businesses. I'd like to bring in Mr. Gilbert Gumpo and hear his thoughts on what challenges have arisen.
Very much, thank you. I'd like to talk this time about the wholesale financial sector in this value chain, and the fact that most of these reviews on the lockdowns, they were quite short-lived. When you say you are going to review this current lockdown in 30 days or in 6 weeks, unfortunately, in the investments decisions sphere, that's a very short space of time. It brings a lot of uncertainty. It therefore brings in postponed investment decisions, let alone when you have got cash flows not coming in for certain ongoing projects. So, Tamba, if I were to say anything, that there is still a gap if you have got to have other phases of COVID coming to us. It becomes a very, very difficult thing as to how we will cope. We saw in the US where there was some survival grants of certain magnitudes that sort of addressed the issue about how do people live on a day-to-day basis. But the wholesale financial services sector, to a large extent, relies on pension benefits, the inflows of those premiums. So you could take a view that you can invest XYZ into infrastructure and into other things. So when you don't know when the current wave is going to be relaxed, and or after it has been relaxed, whether you're going to have another lockdown again. And if you do commit that money, what then happens to the repayments that will then follow. So I think the world at large has not yet been able to deal with the uncertainty around COVID-19. And in my view, until the programs to immunize people have happened, and we've now certain about total immunity, that unfortunately the investment sector is got to contend with. Otherwise, you'll be making uncertain investment decisions, and the commitments to the funders of that investments may not be met. So I've taken this discussion to another level to say even the temporary solutions for on living expenses can be met. In the longer term, we still have a problem. And I think the world therefore still needs to look at COVID as a holistic problem and try and deal with that pandemic conclusively. Otherwise, our world will still remain an unstable place. Digital will address some of the day-to-day needs, but fundamentally, we still need to relook at this COVID menace. I'll pause there for now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gumpo. And now we will turn to Mercy, and she can share with us her thoughts on the challenges that have arisen.
Thank you, Tambu. So for me, it's almost an add-on to what Desmond and Moses said earlier. So Desmond sort of stole everything out of my mouth before. So my issue on coherences in the value chain was actually on customer experience, because for businesses that were not agile enough, you found that they were exposed in terms of customer services. Their customer services, I'll give you an example, a personal experience that I had with a local bank. So I made a transaction that didn't go through. And then when I was trying to make a reversal, to apply for a reversal, I did that transaction, I remember, on the 26th of December. And it took me exactly 2 months to get that transaction reversed. And that's how horrible it was. And you can imagine how I had to be calling every time to say, I'm still waiting for my reimbursement. How do I go through it? How do I do this? Because in the process, I'd actually used one of their technological solutions to curb that whole, challenge of not having to do business conventionally. So I'd use their e-platforms, and then the transaction deducted money from my account, but it didn't get to the end user. And that was the disruption. It took me exactly 2 months to get that reversal. And you can imagine how what it does in a highly inflationary environment like Zimbabwe. And then comes, so businesses that didn't have their customer experience well put together, they were totally exposed. You can imagine how many customers out there were frustrated because of the service provision. It took a lot to go through the WhatsApp platforms. Some of them didn't even respond on time. They responded after 2-3 days. And you can imagine you are in the thick of things. You want to buy something and you are told stock is limited, and then your money has gone through, but it didn't reach the end user. And then you have 2 months until reversal is done. Then comes another issue where communication, Moses was funny enough speaking earlier on about uptake of insurance policies and all this. But then in all that, there were so many technicalities. You know how we do take up policies and we don't read through the fine print, and then we didn't know what it meant. I remember there was a discussion where there's a technicality, insurance policy technicality, where it was saying that because of lockdowns, you are restricted. So like the curfews, right? For example, a curfew in Zimbabwe was up to about 10 p.m. So if you were to incur an accident after 10 p.m., you can imagine, I am a farmer, a horticulture farmer, and I'm supposed to be moving my goods for a 5 a.m. delivery. I have to move it's fresh produce, so I have to move it in the wee hours of the night or of the morning. So I'm moving outside curfew times, and I'm being told if you have an accident, you're not going to be covered because it's against the law. You're moving outside times that are within the law and all those things. And those technicalities are things that we don't know as clients, as the end users of those products. But we had to be now starting to learn more and more, like he was also explaining that people took time to start reading through the fine print and all those things. And we started doing that more and more because, you know, the WhatsApp platforms were saying, do you know that if you incur an accident outside the curfew times, you're not covered by your insurance policy, and you're actually asking yourself, but when they defined these essential services, when they put in these lockdown measures and the curfew times, they didn't sit down to think through what's impact. Yes, it's going to impact everybody else who's in a conventional and routine times of doing things, but then there are exceptionals, and those exceptionals, what then happens when you are caught in between and you're supposed to be moving and you're having such technicalities from your insurance policies and you're having to be delivering because those are the times of delivery outside your curfew times. And, you know, all those things weren't so clear, and it got us in a state of confusion. And those businesses that were not agile enough to get up on their technological spaces, unfortunately, they lost. And for most that had customer experiences that were terrible, they're considering moving. I remember I actually had to change some of my service providers to say, you know what, I didn't get what I was looking for, but at this moment, I think I'll look elsewhere because it was terrible. So those are some of the things that were impacting, especially in terms of the coherences that were not there in terms of the value chain. Another critical example is the one on the restriction of movement, where you've got the police force, right? They're on the roads, you have the exemption letters, and you're being told, no, you can't move to work, you can't move to, even if you have an exemption letter. I remember in Zimbabwe, which is you know, a pity to say that the police, they at the roadblocks, they were saying that we don't have the people that can read your exemption letters are not here today. And people were being turned down and were being told to go back. And you can imagine if it's a critical person who's working in the essential services, and at times you have an exemption letter, you are a farmer, you're delivering your produce, you have an exemption letter, but you get to the police roadblocks, all these police roadblocks, and that way enforcing the lockdowns. And then they tell you that for agriculture, you have a letter, but we're not allowing that to move in. What then? My question is on the cohesion that needed to be there. You know, the thinking outside the box, where people would say, okay, yes, there is the normal times that need to be serviced, but outside service times, which businesses need to be still operating even outside the normal service times, outside curfew times? What provisions can we put together? Those were not well thought out when they were putting all these things. So some of those disruptions and incoherences kept on creeping up and impacting on business provision and service provision. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mercy. I think that's a very valuable statement of where you moved from a provider who wondered what happened to a provider who made things happen. So, you know, thank you for sharing your experiences. And I think thank you for sharing, you know, so and touching on sort of the regulatory governmental perspective that in the preparation of these exemptions and the execution and the management of that exemption process to permit travel, you know, some of these essential services should have been considered in these abnormal pandemic times. I'd like to now hand over to Jeff to share his thoughts, you know, on lack of value chain coherence, and I'm sure he has some exciting examples from the logistics space.
Thank you, Tambo. Thank you. Very engaging discussion and learning lots. Yeah. So just high level, I just want to share two points in terms of the challenges within the logistics space. So the first challenge is around supply chain fracturing, and I'm going to explain that. And the second challenge, both Desmond and Moses have talked about it, it's the cyber security, cyber threats that we're also seeing in this in the logistics space. Yeah. So I'm happy that Messi talked about the lack of coherence within the various government arms. Yeah, we saw that in July last year, the AU they were supposed to have actually operationalized the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, but was delayed until the 1st of January this year. And we've got examples, for instance, trucks for landlocked countries like Zimbabwe, they suffered because we had goods that came by ship into the port of Mombasa. Then they were supposed to move to Uganda, and they were stuck, Uganda and Rwanda, because the countries did not have a coherent strategy of actually leading that. We had also examples of beef that had been sent from South Africa to Angola that actually was stuck, and for 9 days at the border, they couldn't be allowed to cross. So right now they were refrigerated trucks, but it gets affected. So one of the key things, and the World Bank actually tracks it using something called the Logistics Performance Index, the LPI. They track these things. It's the timeliness of goods and what happens in customs and the clearance, the movement of people and goods. And we saw that what was happening with this lack of coordination by the countries, that most of the imports, and these were medical stuff, these were agro-based foods, these were spare parts for manufacturing, were actually stuck in borders. So this was one of the big problems that we saw. I gave you that example of Angola in South Africa, where the meat was just stuck. This is what actually happened. So we need to be careful about that. So this supply chain fracturing caused lots of things. One of the major problems was the rise in price. And the rise in price was caused by several factors. The first one was that freight costs out of China, they increased by over 120%, because again, there was this economics 101, supply and demand. There was no supply of cargo space, and the people were choosing their own price. And it affected that, because at the end of the day, the consumer has to bear the brunt in terms of high prices. Yeah, the middleman was passing their own price. Yeah, so we saw that the health sector was really affected by this supply chain fracturing. Life sciences, the cold chain. You know, yesterday the webinar was on the agro space. Yeah, so the cold chain was actually affected. So if you're using trucks and you come to a border, and there's disruption there's nothing that is happening, or you actually turn back, or the goods that are supposed to cross over the border from South Africa to Zimbabwe to the Congo are supposed to be overnight, but now you're taking 5 days, 7 days, 14 days. It's unacceptable, and it affects the end consumer, because my colleagues have been talking about customer experience. The customer experience is for the end consumer. Yeah. They do not care about this. Yeah, this is what we're seeing even in e-commerce. So if somebody has bought something on Amazon online, they want it delivered. The rest, they don't care. They don't care that there is some weather disruption. They don't care that the cargo space is not enough. They don't care. I've paid my money. I want my goods now. It's the last mile that they are talking about. Yeah. Then the second problem or challenge that we saw, Tambu, was around cybersecurity, because we moved to the online space. So we're working from home, we're ordering goods online. So the scammers also were not resting. They were actually working also overboard. And they started these phishing scams, the 411 scams. I mean, we got lots within the logistics, where people were coming and saying, I was made to pay $100 because they're delivering some goods. And now, because Nigeria is actually known as scammers, most of the scams within Africa were coming out of Senegal. So when people started chasing from IT, they were seeing that Senegal. So the people, in terms of the IP addresses, they were seeing that it was coming from Senegal, because people had actually pivoted from the original source, the well-known source, which was Kenya. So it's something that we have to be very mindful and be careful that once we are now online, it comes with its own challenges around cybersecurity, around firewalls. Yeah, people can actually attack. We become the weakest link in terms of our networks from home. So those are the two challenges that we saw within the logistics space. Thank you, Tambu.
Thank you very much, Jeff. That was an excellent and very interesting insight that, caution IP addresses from Senegal. And I'd like to take this moment to just reiterate that we are accepting questions throughout the program. So please feel free to submit your questions via chat. And we're going to take a brief break to watch a video from Telco. These are our hosts, and they're the ones who are bringing us the webinar, Broadband and Beyond.
For most people, Wi-Fi has transformed from a want into a need. Consumers now expect your establishment to provide free Wi-Fi. But can you use this to your advantage? What if you could get to know your customers really well? What if you could increase their loyalty with customized promotions based on their preferences and needs? What if you could amplify your brand without increasing your costs dramatically? With Telco's Velocity Wi-Fi, you will be able to harness your customers' need for Wi-Fi, turning it into another opportunity to connect with your customers. You will be able to detect popular areas and get to know your customers' favorite spots by following their beaconing mobile phones. You can then plan your store flow accordingly. You will also be able to detect repeat visitors and when they return, offer them loyalty rewards, thereby constantly improving your customer experience. Seamless integration with social media means users can log in with Facebook while in store and share offers and announcements with their peers. With secure Wi-Fi in minutes and customizable splash pages, the shoppers can have a 360-degree experience with your brand. The Telco Velocity Wi-Fi service is monitored by a dedicated 24/7 team that is available to troubleshoot any issues remotely when they occur. A centralized online portal keeps you up to date with reports regarding your network. Engage your customers at the right place at the right time with the right message, only with Telco's Velocity Wi-Fi.
Thank you very much for that message from our hosts, Telco. We appreciate your putting together this wonderful program on digital transformation agenda. I'd like to dive straight into question 3 and ask where and what types of technologies can assist to bridge the gap. I think some of the panelists have touched on this in some of their responses. I think we can start with Mr. Desmond Israel on where and what types of technologies can assist to bridge the gap.
Okay. Somehow I felt you're going to start with me. I don't know why. All right, but I think before we list technologies, we might also want to let our audiences appreciate that you must understand how a particular technology is going to contribute to your transformational opportunity before you seek to leverage on that, because you're going to adapt that technology for specific business needs. So it's not enough to say that, well, the cloud is the way to go, so we are all working cloud. What is cloud going to deliver? What value is it bringing to the business? Because my experience, you don't walk to the boardroom to ask for toys. You walk to the boardroom to get them to buy into what is going to make the business better, what is going to enhance the customer experience. So once you have these at the back of your mind, the next thing you also must understand is you're going to deal with legacy technology in your environment, or in some environments where things are not going to change, not because business don't want to change them, but because they are running platforms that's still delivering the business value, but yet they've not been able to maybe cause an upgrade or increase the technology efficiency of that particular platform. So with these two things in mind, you move in to choose whether you want to enhance availability, whether you want to enhance performance, having in mind compliance, and of course, security. You can, in fact, now is security and privacy together. You can't decouple the two anymore, because security issues will lead to data breach, and where personal data is involved, definitely the regulators are going to come after you, because that would then be a privacy or data protection issue. So back to the question. There are a number of them that is making a wave. So I just pick a few, and then I'll try to address why I would opt for that technology. So for instance, Internet of Things. So devices that are able to sit over the internet, they can be personal gadgets, they can be also enterprise platform, as long as they allow people to personalize and connect. You are able to deliver service to them. An example is that if a public utility company has its meterized system running with internet-based platforms, it gives you the advantage to integrate into mobile payments. So it means the financial service could also leverage on that technology to deliver that mobile payment service. So if you look at it from a partnership point of view, it will border on the financial service service provider to try to let the public utility company buy into these sort of technologies, because ultimately it's going to benefit you to leverage your service. And imagine your customers being able to pay for their utility bills and still get utility running whilst they are on lockdown. It's awesome. And that is the value that technology should bring to you when you're making the choice. Take an advantage of cloud service. And you can deliver any scalable service across the world just because you've leveraged on cloud service. But you choose cloud service and you look at the environment. So in Ghana, there are pockets of regulations that has to do with how cloud service is used, especially within the financial sector. So that actually is going to sort of like stifle your choice of cloud service, because you need to make sure you are compliant to the regulators' requirement for cloud service. So that is a very good example when I say you need to understand why you are choosing the technology in the first place, because you notice that in this case, compliance with the regulatory requirements will become an issue, which will determine what sort of cloud service you go for. You can look at artificial intelligence, machine learning. A few people are still wondering if this is the way to go. I'm actually asking myself, why are we even discussing it? Your customer experience is dependent on insight of what the customer does, how they do things. In fact, for the financial sector, we control risk with what? Credit worthiness and the behavior of our customers. So you can imagine what big data with your artificial intelligence would do when it comes to business intelligence. You get to know your customers so well, you can personalize services for them. You meet them at the point of their need. So artificial intelligence can come in, machine learning can come in and provide that kind of integration, which is actually going to help you deal with these issues. And then we are on Telco's call, so I'm allowed to speak about connectivity.
Yes.
So yes, connectivity is actually one of the biggest things that happen to us. A friend in a conversation, and just briefly, a friend said that we never took airplanes serious until we realized they could take us across the world in a very short time, because the people that deliver airplanes were laughed at. It is the same thing we did with the internet until we realized that we can't live life without the internet. And we've done the same with social media. Good. Back to the point. Connectivity is so crucial. You need to invest into it. And this connectivity delivery, as in the service providers, must give the best, the top notch. If it's 5G, it's 5G. If it's 4G, it's 4G. You need to have consistency with connectivity delivery, because look, everything we are discussing concerning digital transformation will come to zilch without connectivity. We built digital transformation merely because we know we can deliver to the end user. And how are we going to deliver to the end user? The runway is connectivity.
Thank you, Desmond. I'd like to hand over to Mr. Gilbert Gumpo for his thoughts on which types of technologies can assist to bridge the gap.
I'd like to take it over from Desmond and talk about that runway and say that my fellow panelists will talk about the real technologies and things like that. But from that runway discussion, I think we need to step back and talk about the enablers to that technology. And I think we all know the power gap in Zimbabwe's economy. So some of these technologies will not run unless there is sufficient energy at various points. So as we discuss with the backdrop of COVID lockdowns, we must never forget the infrastructure investments that need to happen so that those enablers are happening, be it the Kariba hydro schemes, be it the solar schemes, be whatever the data lines that will enable us to reach the various people. I think I want to add to that line of thought and say this making any service geography neutral also speaks to the ability to train the users very quickly with Leakly, with Leakly interface. I mean, I was looking at a service on TV the other day where you can send a drone to a patient. And if somebody can be able to take a few gadgets from that drone and read the health situation and have some diagnosis, I think let us also be mindful that technologies ultimately run on certain infrastructure, and you must look at that as a whole package. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That is very insightful that the infrastructure shortfalls all across emerging markets, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, do hinder the access to technology. I'd like to go to Mr. Jeff Fury and get his thoughts on what types of technologies can assist to bridge the gap.
Gambo, thank you very much. In fact, my two panelists have covered what was meant for my intro to this question. The starting point was that we're in Industry 4.0. This is where we are, but we are at different stages. And I like what Mr. Gumpo talked about in terms of infrastructure. What are the enablers? It's really important. Right now, we are talking about this African Continental Free Trade Agreement, but the countries are at different levels of development. So they talk about a one-stop customs clearance where a truck that leaves South Africa for Zambia, it just gets cleared at the Bedbridge border post. Then once it gets to Chirundu, it's already cleared, it just passes through. But we do not have basic things like computers. This is where we need to start. So when we're answering this question, we need to consider some legacy issues. There's some legacy issues around infrastructure that we cannot think. Yeah, we need to learn from nature. We need to learn from us. When we're growing up, we didn't start sprinting. Yeah, we had to take the first step. So it's really important that we don't try to be too ambitious. That the legacy issues are parked aside. We need to still consider the legacy issues that we must contend with. Things like data accessibility, computers. Yeah. So the South African side, they can clear the goods, but they come to the Zimbabwean side because of what Mr. Gumpo talked about. There's no power, so they cannot see and acquit the goods. So then it causes delay because Desmond talked about customer experience. In Industry 4.0, it's all about that. It's about customer experience. And the customers are actually looking for efficiency. They're looking for transparency. They want a real-time visibility of their goods. They want real-time visibility of their goods, yeah? And fleet management and so forth. But sometimes we want to leapfrog these things, but let us not forget the legacy issues around infrastructure. We need to be doing that. So we must have bold leadership that actually looks forward and say, what do we do in the future? But how can we be closing the gaps for these ones? Because we can start talking about digital transformation and so forth, but we are running ahead of ourselves. So we need to do that. So this is what I wanted to say, that the legacy issues around infrastructure are really important in Africa, because sometimes we tend to be running ahead of ourselves. We have different technologies that are there for the taking. Mr. Kumbo again was talking about drone deliveries. We're doing excellent work out of Tanzania to remote areas. Yeah, excellent work out of Rwanda to remote areas, already delivering COVID vaccines. That's why if you look at the statistics, you see that Rwanda is doing very well in the remote areas because they're leveraging that technology, the drone technology. But I'm talking about the legacy issues that we must address. One of the problems, you see that drone technology in South Africa is a problem because of the regulatory framework. It's cultured around security rather than commercial. That's why you see that Botswana is going to be doing drone deliveries fairly soon. We're actually doing some testing right now compared to South Africa. South Africa will be a laggard because of the rules. Zimbabwe will be a laggard because of the rules. These are the legacy issues that we need to be looking at, that we must have powerful lobby forums that will make sure that we go and lobby these authorities to make sure that the regulatory framework is enabling for the businesses to think, because the technology is there, we can leverage on it. It's there. We are doing some work on warehouse automation, for instance, where there is no need for human intervention as long as we've got good barcodes. Robots are doing that. Self-driving forklifts are doing that. It's already there, but we need to make sure that the enablers are sorted out in terms of regulation. Yeah. So many countries are going to miss out on drone technology, for instance, because of that. Many countries are going to miss out because they're slow on blockchain, on reverse logistics. These are the things that we're talking about. Because when you buy something online, if it doesn't fit you, so Tambo, if you buy shoes online and you don't like them, you need to have the ability to be able to send them back, which is what is called reverse logistics. But now some of our customs are still far behind the legacy issues that we're talking about. They're not yet automated. They're not yet advanced. They're not yet ready. They're still focusing on being gatekeepers instead of trade facilitators. So they need to change. This is what we're talking about. The technologies, there are have actually 15 points we can cover on thing. Yeah. Last mile delivery. Right now, we've got technology that you do something called on-demand delivery, ODD. You do not need to wait for the driver to come to your home. They can deliver your goods at a shop, and they send you a four-letter PIN code for you, and you just get access to it. You go and collect it anytime you want, at night, early in the morning, on your way to the gym or on your way to school. And so you don't do that. We're creating that. It's already there, but let's create the enabling environment. That is the point. Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Jeff. You know, especially the shoe thing. If you don't like shoes, you should be able to return them. That is my philosophy. All right. I'd like to hand over to Mercy and share her thoughts on, you know, what types of technology can assist on bridging the gap.
Thank you, Tambi. So for me, my philosophy when it comes to technologies, we can no longer hold back technology as we cannot hold back the wind. We need to move on and understand that, embrace the fact that we are in the fourth revolution, industrial revolution. It's technological, and that's the way it goes. If you don't innovate towards technological solutions, you will be a laggard, and your business might actually die. You will be extinct, so to speak, in the business space. So when it comes to solutions, for me, technological solutions in terms of agribusiness financing space, I'll speak from fintech solutions. So there are so many platforms that are cropping up from startups, which are more on crowdfunding space, where there's opportunities. For example, I know a platform in Ghana, Grow For Me, where they're now they're interacting with people in the diaspora to invest in Africa, in the African agriculture space, where they put in their money together, and then we actually grow a commodity. Maybe, for example, they put in an investment for soya, and then they buy it off and it's sold to China, and then we pay off the sponsors. Now they are moving soon to launch the investment in infrastructure capex expenditures on the same platform, where if you need a factory that processes tomatoes, for example, they invest in that through that crowdfunding platform. So those are some of the solutions that we need to start taking up. Sadly, in Zimbabwe, we're still late. I know one of our Zimbabwean entrepreneurs, a startup called WeFarm, is actually Zimbabwean owned, but it had to go and operate in South Africa, launch and start piloting in South Africa first, because our environment here in Zimbabwe wasn't quite enabling for that to happen. So I will also add on to what Mr. Gumbo and Jeffrey were saying, that the infrastructure has to be much enabling for us to have some of those things. Sadly, for these technological solutions, most of them are coming from a startup phase, and unfortunately, they're not yet well embraced for big businesses to go on and to jump onto them. But the good news is we can leapfrog to what everybody else has done in the Western countries, because we don't have to reinvent the wheels. Some of these solutions are already operating and well in place. Amazon is fully operational. It's just taking that model and replicating it and maybe tailor-make it to fit our Zimbabwean solutions, because you find that, yes, in the thick of COVID, online purchasing was there, but then online purchasing was there, but you find that your request took time to be responded to, because there was nobody who was manning that online shopping platform. And then where you need something like right where you are on demand, like Jeff was saying, it took 2-3 days because nobody was manning that platform where you're putting your request of your online shopping requirements. And there's some solutions that we can think of, like the CRM softwares, customer relationship management softwares, tailor-made free of charge, like, for example, HubSpot. I was able to be taught of to use HubSpot by my mentor, who's an Australian business expert. And that's what I'm starting to use. And I kept on starting using it during the thick of COVID, where I had to be communicating with most of our clients to say that in terms of customer update of produce that we had, we didn't have online markets and market information, like our previous speakers were saying yesterday, right in time information to say where is what needed, what produce is needed, where and what price, and at what price. But with such platforms like the HubSpot, I had to be able to use that and communicate with all my clients to say, this is a product update that I had. And but sadly, it's not everyone who's able to do that. And most of the big businesses, unfortunately, when it comes to embracing technology, we were still taking it at a slow pace, a tortoise pace, especially here in Africa. Whereas, the other issue is also about the speeds at which our internet services us, because I remember the other time I was calling my service provider, I shall not mention them, and the internet service provider, and they were telling me that you have so many devices connected, so your speeds are going to be limited. And they were telling me of of brand health, broadband health and all this. And I was saying, I don't need no explanation of broadband health. What animal is that? All I need is to be serviced, and to be serviced well. I have kids who are online schooling at home, and they comes me as well. I'm here and I'm doing my working from home, my agile working from home, and somebody else is doing what they are doing. And then you're telling me that I have too many devices connected. What do I have the internet for? And to make matters worse, it's unlimited service. So why do I need it when it's now limited, and you're telling me of brand health, broadband health and everything? So some of it is more to do with also the infrastructure that we have, which is not enabling to take up the technological solutions that we need to have. So that's a key one. Policy and service providers, you need to make sure that you increase your speed to lightning speed to make sure your infrastructure services well to take up the technological solutions that are out there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mercy. I feel your pain on the internet speed. It has been, it really is slow, and we pay more for our data than most of our, or if not all of our neighbors. I'll need to check that, but Zimbabwe does pay heavily for data that is actually pretty slow. We'd like to go to Mr. Moses Mujati, who will round off on the question. And I'd like to encourage people to submit their final questions, because after Moses has spoken, we'll go straight to Q&A. So Mr. Mujati, take it away.
Great, thank you very much. All the other comments, I think, superb comments, very, very pertinent. For me, I'd just like to break it down to two things. We've heard people talk about enablers. What I want to talk about is drivers, rather. You've got your enablers. I'm hearing people talking about that runway, and that's very, very important. It can be very frustrating when you're in certain countries in Africa. For me, technology has to do one of two things. For me, technology has to give me access to be educated, to learn. So I want to learn. Whatever technology I deploy has to make me better from the point of view of giving me access to information, whether I'm in business or whether I'm studying or wherever. I need to have information of how to access markets. So number one for me is education. That's what technology, that's a driver for me that will determine what technological option I opt for. Then the second one is market access. Technology needs to be able to give me access to market, no matter where I am. I need to be able to sell consulting services into the United States. I need to be able to put product into whatever market and get paid for it, and have that commerce chain being unbroken. So if it educates me, if it gives me access to market, then I welcome it. One of the problems which we have within the continent of Africa is this big animal called government. I'm not going to make political statements, but government is very important from the view of policy setting, and the policy that's set will determine what technologies can proliferate. I love what Mr. Gumpo said, that we can find ourselves getting frustrated because we simply do not have the supporting infrastructure. And Jeff alluded to it when he spoke about getting ahead of ourselves. So just in closing, let's simplify technology to things that can educate us by allowing us access to information, because information by itself is a commodity. In Africa, we need to have technologies that give us access to be able to sell the things which we already export so well. Like, for example, our labor. I'm having a discussion with some friends, and we're talking about Zimbabwe. Sorry to keep bringing this discussion back to Zimbabwe. And we're talking, and they're saying Zimbabwe needs to go agro. Zimbabwe, we need to do this with our farms. We need. And I said, guys, hold on. If I could, I would stop all agricultural production in Zim. I would stop everybody from mining, and then I would export its people. Because Zimbabwe's greatest export is its people. And you'll see from the remittances data, et cetera, I'm not going to speak about specific items of technology, but whatever technologies we bring on board that we place a premium on assimilating into our everyday lives, may it educate and may it give us access to markets. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your thoughts, Moses, and thank you to all the wonderful panelists. I think this has been, a very, very encouraging discussion. I'd just like to thank our hosts, Telco, Broadband, and Beyond, who have been hosting this webinar. And we will now dive straight into the Q&A. So please keep those questions coming. I think the first question, I think this is a question and a comment. Online shopping facilities didn't seem to be manned at all. So what is in place for ordinary supermarkets across cities and towns in Zimbabwe to be aware of and confident with using digital platforms to serve their customers? So I think, Mercy, if you'd like to take that on.
Thank you, Tambu. So with that question, I think I touched on it because I had a similar experience as well, where your responses are late because business are not agile enough to note that now it's no longer business as usual. We need to start innovating and start changing the way we work and start thinking and run away from the box and start thinking wayward and say, what is enabling the worst to be able to, what is enabling Amazon to be able to do what it's doing efficiently? And we embrace that from a business side in Zimbabwe for the small businesses, the small supermarkets. For example, Fresh in a Box, their business was already technologically placed. And for them, when everybody else was starting to struggle to say, how do we start servicing our customers electronically, online shopping, etc., they had already had a perfect model that worked. So for me, for the supermarkets, local supermarkets, it's a matter of just understanding what is it that Fresh in a Box is doing well that we can simulate and do for our own business. And if it needs them to ask them to go and benchmark with Fresh in a Box, ask them how they're doing it. And then you come and you customize the solution, you make it work for you. Because the challenge that we have as in Africa is that when we are looking at, we do a proper copy and paste of solutions from the West and from from Europe, which don't actually very much fit jigsaw fit into our problems here in Zimbabwe. So what we need is take the beauty of what they've already done, their technological advancements that they have in terms of online shopping, come here, put them into our solutions, try them out, see where we have gaps and glitches, and we clear those to suit our own systems. Because remember, we said some of the issues that we actually have here is infrastructure disruptions, where our networks, sometimes you actually totally shut down, you can't even connect, your connectivity is so poor. And imagine you have a lot of orders that are coming in. I remember a few weeks ago, there was an outcry on Twitter where the Zimra platform was not working, and a lot of people were complaining because they said they kept on saying they have backlogs, but everybody was saying, how long does it take for you to clear such backlogs? And we only knew that it was an issue of their maybe slightly primitive technological solutions that they have that doesn't take the amount of volumes of the requests that were now being put on their databases and their systems, and it clogged the system so much that it then brought so much frustration to the clients and the customers. So it's not a matter of one size fits all, copy and paste from what's working in Europe, and you say this systems work perfectly in Europe, and we come and we copy and paste. No, it's an issue of saying, okay, this is the system. How can we then try it out? And then which glitches are there? What can we then improve? And sometimes you need a multifaceted approach where you bring in the service provider, you bring in telco, and you say, telco, we have this technological solution that we want to bring in. That's what innovation is all about. You bring in your telco and you say, we want a solution that does 1, 2, 3, 4, the insights that Desmond was talking about. And then you are driven by such insights to bring out that solution, and you use the service provider to tailor make that for you. And then you're only then coming in to say, no, change here, tweak here, do this to suit my own needs. And you will see that we will have perfect solutions for our businesses. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The next question goes to Mr. Bujati. Given that many insurance policies now have pandemic exclusions, how useful is insurance in these times of COVID?
That's a very, very good question. You know, where you've got an insurer who deliberately moves away from solving the problems of the day, that's not an insurer. That's not a person who is serious about doing business. Mercy touched on something and said, you know, when she's speaking about websites that are unmanned, storefronts that are unmanned, where they take 3-4 days to respond to you. For me, those are not people who are in business. For me, those are people who are just escorting the rest of the people who are actually in business. So a simple, straight answer. There's no room in any market for an insurer or a financial institution that deliberately excludes a particular risk. That's why the actuaries, that's why you've got your chartered accountants, all these smart people. That's why you've got machine learning and artificial intelligence. These things are all there. They're supposed to help us to come up with the correct price for risk. And what I love about technology is that, like I was saying earlier, that technology gives you access. It gives you access to an insurer in the States. It gives you access to an insurer in South Africa, globally. So the competition platform has become very, very big, and things like this just serve to wean out players who claim to be in business but are not in business.
All right, and thank you very much for your thoughts. And I think the next question is addressed to Mr. Jeff Fury, so it's addressed directly to you, sir. What is your proposal about how we resolve information asymmetry, especially around markets?
Very interesting question, Tambu. Thank you for that question. And partly Moses has actually answered it when he talked about how do we use technology as a driver to access education and also access markets. Yeah, so it's around technology. But let me share a story, a quick story for a couple of seconds. Yeah, our drone technology that we've been using, we've done that through a collaboration with a number of universities. Yeah, so in Africa, the collaboration between businesses and universities, it's non-existent. It's lacking. This is where we need to be looking at. Yeah, we need to have proper, robust collaboration, collaborative efforts with universities, with higher institutions of learning. Let me share another secret for our attendees here. One of the best kept secret is, if you want some innovation in Zimbabwe, link up with the Harare Institute of Technology. Harare Institute of Technology. They are streets ahead of all the other universities when it comes to innovation. Yeah, they've done lots of research. They've got collaborations with other countries, with other universities in different countries. So we need to do that. Yeah, we need to. Information asymmetry means that we are not very active. Yeah, so there's lots of places where we get information. Yeah, it's all about, we talk about big data, data analytics. Where do you get that information? all our embassies, yeah, all our embassies have got a business unit, yeah. If you go to Japanese embassy right now, they've got JICA that does the business side. Or there they have all the information that you actually need, yeah. You go to the Indian embassy in Avondale, they've got the business unit, yeah, which is run by the deputy ambassador. They'll give you that. You go to the German embassy, you go to all the embassies, so you do that. So it's collaboration, it's research, it's data. Information is there. We are not utilizing our universities. If I look at Zimbabwe, we're not utilizing MSU, NAS, UZ, HIT, I've talked about HIT, Lupane, the infrastructure is there. We're not utilizing. It's what Moses talked about. It's that education, access to education, access to markets, yeah? We use data, the data is there. Are we talking to various industry bodies? They have knowledge, yeah? CZI, Zimtrade, they have knowledge, yeah? These are the people that we need to look at. And lastly, Tambu, in terms of information asymmetry, I've realized that most of our SMEs, they do not have websites. You are tossed in the fourth industrial revolution if you don't have a website. How are you trading without a website? So we need to also go to basics when we're talking about information asymmetry. Get the basics right, yeah? Let's have that website. Start with having a website. We've got lots of youngsters that have done university education that can help you set up a very, very attractive and interactive website. Let's start there. Then let's research. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think next up we have a question. It is also my understanding that most service providers have been more reluctant towards going digital because they fear that online security can be compromised through hacking, etc. How can you help assure that their fears are not as big as they're made to be? So I think Desmond would be perfect for that question.
Okay, so that takes us to one of the things that I've been evangelizing for quite some time now, and that is to sell security and privacy as part of your competitive edge. You know, because what I've realized is most of the institutions are investing into security implementations, and they are treating it as you know, one of the workshop materials of IT, and I think that security has gone beyond that. Now you're doing return on security investments. So you have to place in the same premium that you do for your security on any other investment, you know, and that is why whatever, you know, you invest in doing security to enhance your customer experience, which is about building the trust, you need to communicate that to your customers. And there are multiple ways in doing that. If you've gone through maybe an ISO certification and you've gone through compliance and you've been certified, it's enough for you to say on your website that you're ISO compliant. It's enough for you to put in a PR publication in the newspaper to communicate that you're ISO certified. You know, if you've done some managed detection response implementation without giving out details, that of course will become counterproductive because attackers could also use some of these specific details to engage you. You can just go for a congratulatory message on the steps that you've taken to ensure security. You could hold digital security webinars for your customers. I mean, what's that going to cost you to bring your customers together on a webinar across the world or across the country to explain to them what investments you've put in to ensure, you know, a secured experience with your services? I think more importantly is actually putting in the investment to ensure security and privacy. You know, you have to do it. It's not a charade. You can't build a mirage out of that because it will expose you if you're not doing the right thing. And for our consumers and everybody else on the call, one way or the other, an institution will be hacked. I know this because I've done this 15 years and more. One way or the other, an institution would be hacked. But I'll tell you what makes an institution worthwhile. It is the resilience, how they recover from these things, and how they approach, you know, some of the breaches. You would know if this institution is not taking your data serious, if it's not taking their security serious, by how they handle some of the breaches. But breaches do happen one way or the other. You're going to get breached, but it's your resilience. How do you recover from this? What is the business continuity plan in there? What is your disaster recovery? What did you put in place? What's the incident response when these things do happen? So yes, patronize digital platforms, patronize digital payments, patronize digital tools. But look, security actually begins with you. Privacy also begins with you. You're hardly going to have major security breaches for major enterprises. And I'm saying this advisedly because most of the time, the issues that we complain of as consumers are because of maybe lack of our own due diligence in using some of these platforms, or maybe lack of information about using some of these platforms when it comes to the security aspect of it. So I think that we as consumers must take some of these security engagements online, even offline. We need to take it seriously. And as businesses, we must truly invest into the security of the platforms where we deliver our services. It's just like building, for the financial sector, it's just like building your bank and deciding that you're not going to put the appropriate vote there. I don't even think the regulator is going to take you serious and give you a license. But yeah, that's basically what I want to communicate.
Thank you, Desmond. And now we have a question for Mr. Gumpo. It begins with a bit of a statement. Zimbabwe needs to do better in terms of global financial services. Most people in the diaspora are very scared of banking and investing in financial institutions in Zimbabwe. How can things be done such that people know and feel assured that if they deposit their monies there, they can move those funds, they can access the funds, and how can digital technologies help out in some of these challenges in sort of the banking / asset management space?
Thank you very much. That is quite a mouthful. But let me start off by digressing and saying that we need to go back a little bit and say sustainable savings and economic growth, should it really come from outside? I watched the Kenyan experience a couple of years back where they had these SACCOs. So these are club unions. These are people who are familiar with one another. We used to call it maroons in our society in the days gone by. Thereby, people agree to contribute, whether it's $10 a month or whatever. Then they police themselves. They do whatever projects they have. They share information, and they share objectives. Before I talk about FDI and that kind of thing, I would want to encourage the contributor and others to say, perhaps let's look more in inward investments. Let's try and create a savings culture from within, so that then we can address those things that are very specific to us. Diaspora funds and things like that, they tend to be informed by certain things that are not necessarily societal. And that's the same with FDI. So I would encourage people to spend more time on financial literacy. How do I save that $1? How do I save that $10? And in what vehicles then do I put that money? But be that as it may, let us not duck the question. FDI will always be an opportunity. Diaspora inward inflows will always be an opportunity. So we need to create information systems that are real time, that are transparent. We need to create investment objectives, business objectives that are very, very specific. If, say, you have got specific drawdowns, it must be very clear that there is a drawdown due in 6 months or in 3 months, and that drawdown must be supported by accomplishments with the prior stages. So to me, it's again the digitalization of projects. I think we saw people a couple of years back wanting to build residential properties back home, and the people would take pictures of the next door house or even a different town and say that, yeah, your house is under construction when they are still at ground level. In fact, there's nothing that has happened. So I think, Tambu, let us help one another, our students at HIT, to help build information systems that give confidence. If I say I'm doing a mini hydro plant at Batoka, for example, and diasporans want to see what is happening, I think technology is there for us. If I'm saying this week we're doing site clearance, we're employing extractors, we are employing X number of people, it should be traceable. And I think that will bring that necessary confidence. But from my founding statement, let us try and disabuse ourselves on over-reliance on foreign money. What tends to happen is that if you don't have a savings discipline and investment discipline and tools that report on that investment performance, then that FDI will get wasted. I mean, we heard of a plant, a solar plant somewhere outside Rwanda. There was a lot of controversy as to what happened to that money. It's all about building information systems that assure us that what is purported to be happening is happening. In agriculture, for mercy, I think we've got a technology that can read how many plants are on your farm, how much wheat is there, how much expected yield you expect. So let us build on that technology so that it gives assurance. If your estimate was that we're going to get 7-8 tons per hectare on maize, it can't be that on harvesting, then you get 3 tons. So I suppose let's build whatever the relevant information systems that can give assurance, not only to foreign investors, but also the local investors. Remember, substantial investments in this country are done by corporates. And those corporates, their boards never go to Wange to see that the mine is performing XYZ. So we need to give that information and assurance and the monitoring techniques. I don't want to say too much, but I think those are some of my insights against a difficult question.
I think those were a great insights against it, a very broad question that is highly relevant, especially when you think that India, the #1 remittance receiver in the world, gets 83 billion from Indians worldwide and manages to harness that to effectively grow India. So given so many Zimbabweans are in the diaspora, it would be fantastic if diaspora our friends in the diaspora felt comfortable, sending their money home, investing at home, and building a better Zimbabwe for us all. Yeah. So I would like to, thank the panelists, once again, and just hand over to Mr. Godfrey Joa, who is the Managing Director of Telco, for a vote of thanks before we pursue our concluding remarks.
Wow. It's been a wonderful session. Thank you very much to all our panelists. It was incisive, it was informative, it was educative. I've learned a lot today, and I'm sure our viewers have as well. Thank you so much. I learned about enablers, infrastructure, laws that must be put in place before digital transformation can progress well. I learned about drivers. I learned about the actual technologies that we must deploy. It's been a useful session all around. Thank you so much. A big hand to all of our panelists. You've been wonderful today. Thank you so much. Just some shameless marketing. Telco is here for you. We are part of what's happening in the Industrial Revolution Version 4. We are part of digital transformation, front and center of it. Whether it's connectivity, we are there, we'll offer it for you. Whether it's power issues, we have a solar division that will do anything from a 1 kVA system to whatever you need, so that you've got the enabler to do your digital transformation. Whether it's actual systems, IT systems and applications, we've got a wonderful ERP that is so versatile. It will connect you to markets, it will connect you to payment systems. Come and talk to us about it. In this digital transformation era, you've just got to have the right system that will enable you to leapfrog and have your processes automated in every way you can. So thank you so much. Telco is here. We are very happy to have sponsored and co-hosted this. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you, Tambu, for doing a fantastic job. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate the work you've done today in educating our viewers. Have a very good evening or morning, wherever you are reaching us from. Back to you, Tambu.
Thank you so much, Godfrey. I appreciate it. So, thank you very much to all the participants again, and to Telco, Broadband and Beyond, for hosting us and leading us through this seminar, this 3-day seminar over health, agribusiness, and now finance, logistics, and technology. I think some of our takeaways from today's session were there are 3 kinds of businesses. A business that makes things happen, a business that watches things as they happen, and a business that wonders what on earth just happened. And I think, we have had, from the examples provided by our panelists, the businesses that make things happen, their characteristics are ones of agility and understanding that digitalization is not something that is nice to have. It is an essential, critical part of the business. And that the COVID-19 pandemic has really accelerated the adoption of technology across the board. Our panelists also touched on some of the challenges particular to emerging markets, infrastructure shortfalls. We have issues in access to electricity. We have issues in access to water. We have issues in access to internet. And even the internet that is provided has challenges in terms of speed. And therefore, the underpinning infrastructure requirements are sometimes lacking within these environments. However, as some of the panelists have pointed out, there are certain providers who observe the chaos of the underlying infrastructure and find solutions to work around this. For example, there might not be a road to a remote area, so I use a drone to deliver the product. Leveraging technology in order to create solutions for that particular market environment. So I think we have learned a lot. And one of the key issues from a finance perspective is that banks lend on creditworthiness. Banks focus on cash flow when it comes to lending and disbursement of loans. And for all the industries that have been affected, agribusiness, healthcare, all the businesses that have been affected by COVID, some businesses have had challenges in terms of their cash flows. Therefore, servicing existing loans and even applying for new loans has been a challenge. And so the debt financing, the debt capacity of businesses has been reduced. From a bank perspective, several banks have been leaned upon to provide certain grants and services, lending money to government, purchasing government debt, so government can raise money to deploy in some of these alleviation strategies, particularly in South Africa, which had a COVID relief program, Ghana, which also had a COVID relief program, and several other sub-Saharan African countries. And so now those banks are looking at their balance sheets and they're concerned about their ability, their sort of debt to equity ratios and their ability to maintain their function as financial intermediaries within the ecosystem. And so we have seen that from some of our panel discussions. And I think in conclusion, we have seen that technology is a way is a real pathway for entrepreneurs to succeed despite the challenges in the marketplace. And we are seeing, artificial intelligence, we're seeing, cybersecurity, we're seeing all sorts of innovations in this space that are critical for Africa to move forward and for all our businesses to move forward together. So I think that's sort of my concluding remarks at this stage. So again, a big thank you to Desmond, Gilbert, Jeff, Moses, and Mercy, yes, for taking the time to share their expertise with us and to be part of our distinguished panel. Thank you to the team and everyone and all the participants. Thank you for your wonderful questions. This broadcast will be put up on Facebook, and so we hope that you can watch it again, you can share it, and you can share the knowledge and the learnings that we have gleaned from this session. So thank you from me, and over to you, to the team at Telco.
Thank you so much. The recording will be up in a day or so. Thank you, everybody. Good day.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye.